to Andros what Andros has been waiting for generations.
Amen.
Live from Cabinet Office in downtown Nassau, the Bahamas, a report to the nation. Here's your host, Julian Reed.
Thank you very much. Firstly, let me welcome all of you who are here, who are ordinarily not in the Cabinet of the Bahamas for this particular event. Tomorrow we celebrate the second anniversary of our elections, and we thought it would be the right thing to do to invite the press into the Cabinet room to ask us any questions they would wish to ask us, and to enable us to present to the country what we feel we have done pursuant to the confidence of the Bahamian people being expressed in our favor. I would want to recall for those who are listening that in 2012, May the 7th, we were elected. We won 29 of the 38 seats in Parliament, therefore recognizing that that represented a significant expression of confidence in the Progressive Liberal Party. In October of that year, we had the occasion of a by-election upon the resignation of the Right Honourable Hubert Ingram, and the people of North Abaco again demonstrated in overwhelming numbers their confidence in the Progressive Liberal Party. Since that time, we have in fact been truly committed to bringing enlightened governance to our country. When we were elected, we recognized that there were two major handicapping problems facing the country. The first was crime, and we committed ourselves to a process of making the Bahamas a more secure country, a safer country, and notwithstanding all that has taken place, we remain undiminished in our view and belief that we are going to conquer this malady that exists in our country.
Yes.
We remain truly motivated to continue to introduce new strategies, all of which are calculated to more equip the Royal Bahamas Police Force, to more equip urban renewal, to more equip NGOs, all agencies that are, including the church, that are involved in the fight to make our country a safer country, and Dr. Notich will be able to speak in greater detail to that. We recognize that the people of our country were without jobs, that unemployment among young people was over 20%, that the average unemployment was around just under 16%, and therefore there was a compelling urgency to produce jobs in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I want to be able to impress upon the Bahamian people that in an island nation, one of the most significant challenges is the experience of people in islands moving from their islands to New Providence and to Grand Bahama, urban areas looking for employment. And as a result, the development of the country has become skewed. So in our first term, we committed ourselves to the creation of economic activity in the Family Islands. In our second term, being re-elected in 2012, we renewed that commitment, and we believe we have had considerable success. And this is where I challenge the press. Just as we have to recognize that the Bahamas is not New Providence, the Bahamas is not Grand Bahama, the Bahamas is made up of a chain of islands beginning with Bimini, the Gateway, Abaco, Grand Bahama in the north. And let me address them very quickly. We have unparalleled success in Bimini. There is over full employment. There are great opportunities for additional employment. We are sensitive to any question of the protection of the environment. And our policies are calculated not only to cause there to be employment and development, but also integrating into the employment ownership by Bahamians. And wherever we go, that will be the model without compromising the environment. But in Bimini, you can expect, in addition to the hundreds of new jobs that are being created, an additional 800 jobs will be created later this year when a 300-plus room hotel is opened. We are putting in a new pier for a cruise ship, and that cruise ship is intended to bring as many as 400,000 people a year to Bimini. We have renovated the airport, and the airport is intended to bring in stopover visitors. So Bimini and the people of Bimini, notwithstanding the relative speed at which all of this is happening, it's all headed for a way of life for the people of Bimini that is elevated to the highest level. In Abaco, Abaco has a place called Baker's Bay. Baker's Bay has moved from 300 employees to some over 650 employees. It is a very dynamic development going on. It is a resort development, mixed resort development, and it is very, very successful. Also includes empowerment for Bahamians. We have fought valiantly to ensure that Bahamian contractors continue to get opportunities at Baker's Bay. There's another development in Abaco that the confidentiality provisions stops me from speaking in any detail today. But a major change is taking place in that development for the better. Major new persons or entities will come in to take over that development, and again it will augur well for Abaco. There is a new harbor that we agreed to in the by-election to maintain the decision of our predecessors, a new harbor in North Abaco. That new harbor in itself is calculated to bring about new employment, new opportunities for fishermen, new opportunities for people trading. And then there is the airport. We had challenges with the Marsh Harbor terminal, challenges that involved the way in which it was constructed, the cost of construction. But we have brought Vantage into Abaco. Vantage is the manager of the airport here in New Providence, and they are now giving us specific advice with respect to the opening of that airport, and Mrs. Hannah Martin will be able to speak to it. There's Schooner Bay in Abaco, again, another green investment that is wonderfully developing. A lot of Bahamian owners, and we are very, very excited about Abaco. We moved to Grand Bahama. Grand Bahama has been in the doldrums, and I am incredibly excited about this new development of Sunwing taking over a hotel that was dormant, opening up that hotel. They're flying their own 737s into Grand Bahama. They've caused new employment in Grand Bahama, hundreds of new people, and we've projected that ultimately at least 1,000 jobs will be created as a result of Sunwings coming into Grand Bahama. In addition to that, we have developers who are interested in new opportunities. I think the maturity of my government has been demonstrated very recently when I entered discussions with the container port, the Grand Bahama Port Authority, and MSC Shipping about taxes that were levied against them and that they thought would be extremely harmful to the economy. My government put that under review, and my government has agreed, in consideration of an agreement by major entities in Grand Bahama to expand their involvement in Grand Bahama, we have agreed to roll back those taxes. I want to be able to just say it again to colleagues around the table that it is a good decision that will produce hundreds of new jobs, where the container port and MSC will expand their involvement in the community, where Grand Bahama Shipping and others will also do the same thing, and I am very happy about it. My final point about Grand Bahama is we continue to talk to Sunwing about new opportunities, new hotels, because their mantra is they just don't take one hotel. And so we are very, very optimistic as to further development on their part. The other point is that with respect to West End, we are anxious about that. We're looking at that. And all of these details, we would ask Mr. Kalish Roll to be able to speak to those issues. But on Grand Bahama, yesterday I met with the operators of a hotel in Bootle Bay. And they came to speak to me about making a multi-million-dollar investment in agriculture in Grand Bahama and in Andros. And I thought that in itself was magnificent and moving forward. Again, as we go down through Eleuthera, Exuma, Cat Island, again, all of these islands are on the move. In Eleuthera, I just want to be able to say for the first time, we feel very optimistic in South Eleuthera about the Samiento investment in Cotton Bay and about the Wilson South Eleuthera Properties investment there. We are near heads of agreement, and we think things will happen there. And right down through the line, island by island, we are able to talk to you. And Meguana, where the Minister of Agriculture, myself, and the Minister of Transport just went, the government of the Bahamas commissioned a 6,900 feet runway. We have $4.8 million worth of roads being built there, and the question is, what do we do to create economic activity? And we have proposals before that. So what I'm saying is that just looking at the islands themselves, before I even get to Andros and New Providence, we have demonstrated very clearly by the way in which things are being developed, all right, that anchor properties or economic activity is being created in those islands, and jobs are being created as a result. In San Salvador, for example, the Deputy Prime Minister can speak as the representative to the fact that Club Med has agreed to expand significantly. 2 other hotel properties have developed there, being developed there as well. And so in San Salvador, the challenge for the government, Mr. Roll will speak to that, happens to be infrastructure around the airport. And so, but again, jobs, many, many jobs, full employment. The final point I wish to make about the islands happens to do with Andros, the Berry Islands. The Berry Islands provide jobs to people from North Andros. We have now agreed for the redevelopment of Chub Key, the reopening of Chub Key. So in Chub Key, you will find that people will go from North Andros there, but North Andros now has all the jobs it could look forward to, because we've created something called BAMSI, the Bahamas Agricultural and Marine Sciences Institute in North Andros. And this is perhaps one of the single greatest, I think, triumphs of my government. Andros is larger than Trinidad. In North Andros, there's 138,000 arable acres of land. We have already awarded $20 million worth of contract for the construction of an institute in Andros for teaching agriculture and marine sciences. But we have added a commercial arm to each institute, meaning that the institute will make money by participating in the economy. We have gone to the University of Miami, who has agreed to join us in the Marine Institute. We have gone to the University of Florida, who has agreed to join us in the Agricultural Institute. The University of Florida happens to be exactly what we were looking for, because they say for every dollar they invest in agriculture, they get $10 back. So it is really right down the line. But what is going to happen? In Andros, a new city will develop around this, and this is happening now. We have Morgan's Bluff, and so we're looking at Morgan's Bluff, where the containers, agricultural containers, will go out to look at the fitness of Morgan's Bluff to receive cruise ships. All of that we're doing now. But something else happened. I challenged the Inter-American Development Bank to get involved with us, and they gave a grant to the National Trust and the Audubon Society for Andros and Inagua. Because Inagua has 100 species of birds, they have the flamingos, they have the wild donkeys, they have everything that people would want to travel to Inagua for. But in Andros, they spoke about this extraordinary bank of environmental assets, of ecological assets. So I asked the Inter-American Development Bank, how could you help me now that I've made a commitment to put in this term $100 million in infrastructural improvements in Andros? How could you help me create commercial activity in Andros? They have come back and said they would do a major grant to the government. And the president of the bank, I believe, is coming here on the weekend. They did it in Belize, where Stanford University came into Belize and did a survey and study demonstrating how you could have sustainable commercial development without compromising the environment. And they have agreed to bring that to North Andros, subject to my putting a planning unit together. The planning unit is put together. So I would tell my colleagues that we are going to be making a giant step in Andros, not just in agricultural endeavors in supplying, not just in fisheries and fish farming, but we are going to be able to create in Andros what people of Andros have been waiting a generation for: major economic activity. Which brings me to New Providence. And finally, New Providence is where joblessness has had the greatest impact. And this overview of the islands that Kalis will fill in for you, because the Exumas and Kalis role has just finished negotiating a major investment in two keys that will employ a lot of people, and wonderfully in Exuma, in the Barataria area, but the two keys. It is going to be a new paradigm for Exuma, where the homes will be built for the employees in Baratari, and on Williams Island and Children's Bay Key. Williams Key and Children's Bay Key will be this mega wonderful development that they say will be the best hotel in the entire world, best resort, small resort in the entire world. So we are very excited about that. He can speak to that. But in New Providence, this is where we have the major challenges, and this is where we have to bring a lot of focus. We have engaged in a comprehensive house-to-house survey in 3 constituencies: Engleson, Bain and Grantstown, and Centerville, with a view, and that has been coordinated by Dr. Nottage, with a view to learning, not anecdotally, but in detail, the challenges of each house, so we could understand why young men in particular fall awry of the law and do things. We put that under intense scrutiny, because we are not going to be beaten by a minority in this country on crime. We are going to continue to work, and we know it is more than equipping the police. It's more than adding more and more police officers, which we have. It's more than just strategy for policing. It has to do with reaching people in their environs and helping them to understand and to have their environs improved, and to understand why they must not engage in that kind of behavior. So we are involved in that. But in New Providence, we know there must be jobs. So we're looking forward to Baha Ma and the opening of the tower at Baha Ma in December of this year. We're looking forward to the opening of the other hotels as the year progresses, and therefore we're looking forward to 5,000 new jobs there. We're looking forward to the opening of the Holowesco Hotel at the gates of Lyford Key, and we are currently negotiating with purchasers who have been identified by the pension fund for the South Ocean property. We are currently negotiating for ourselves so that we can say, based on what they propose to do, we will give our agreement so that the pension fund could proceed with selling the property. Those are areas that we have looked at in New Providence. And so from the point of view of joblessness, the details are there to be filled, but we feel very, very optimistic that the unemployment rates will come down substantially. We are very confident in the Ministry of Investments that we have done the heavy lifting, and that a lot of the work has now led to the plans being agreed to on development and construction to start, and more jobs throughout the Bahamas. And that is the wonderful point, because for the first time, people will be able to stay in their communities, finding jobs in their communities. First real effort at that. There are so many other areas, but I want my ministers to deal with this. And since I started with crime, I wish Dr. Nottish really to speak to the issue so that any questions you ask could be on the basis of an informed position.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The mission of the Ministry of National Security is to create an environment which ensures public safety and security through the maintenance of law and order and the commitment of available resources to the protection of life and property. We've been in the government now for 2 years, and our approach has been to utilize a multi-dimensional set of efforts to crime containment and reduction in order to achieve the following objectives: more effective law enforcement and policing, to devise social interventions aimed at discouraging a lifestyle of crime and violence, the rehabilitation of offenders through our policies and through the introduction of new legislation, and tackling the root causes of crime. We've achieved more effective law enforcement and policing through the strengthening of our law enforcement agencies in the areas of intelligence, increase in human resources, crime detection has improved, and we have increased significantly the presence of police and other law enforcement officers in our communities, particularly the communities that are considered to be hot spots for crime. Overall, there has been a systematic reduction in crime. This year, for example, between January and the end of April, we have had a reduction in all phases of crime in the country, both against people, except that there was a slight increase in the numbers of rape, and in crimes against property, housebreaking, stealing from vehicles, stealing vehicles, etc., have been reduced. In New Providence, there have been one less murder than there was last year. And I single out murders because murders are the thing that creates concern among the population that they're most concerned about. If we're able to reduce the number of murders per year, I think that would be a tremendous relief to the average person in our country. I just want to remind everybody that in 2011, the year before we became the government, there were 127 murders in the country. And in our first year in government, at least the first 7 months, there were 111. So there was a reduction. Last year, there was 119, but we are still below the volume that we met. The truth is that crime is multifactorial and requires a lot of different strategies. And we have, over the past several months, been introducing a number of strategies that we think will work. When it comes to the root causes of crime, I am satisfied, and research has shown that family dysfunction is the basis for a lot of the crime. What do I mean by that? I mean that we have families which are ill. There are many absent fathers. For example, when we polled the students of the homes in some of the over-the-hill communities, we found out that 80% of students live in a home where their mother is the head of the household, and there's no father or no male presence in the household. 50% of the households have a man at the head of the household. So what does that tell you? That tells you that males are absent, and the result of males' absence is seriously felt by the communities. Too many of our young children don't even know who their fathers are not able to interact with them, and are not looked after by them. We have the problem of poor education. Too many of our youngsters drop out of school early, or get suspended, or get expelled. I'm one of those who don't believe that the school system has the right to put anybody out. But what we have to be able to do is to identify those students who have a problem and submit them to conditions, to strategies that will help to reform them. These people who come from these types of families, their value system is deficient. They are often delinquent. They are truants. And when they drop out of school, they don't have the skills to be able to get themselves a job. They fall into the drug culture, either using drugs. They start off with a backward or a beady. They end up with marijuana, either using it or selling it. And then they get into the criminal situation as a result of the sale of drugs. These are all problems that we have to attack and are attacking. So we have drugs, we have unemployment, we have poor education, we have lack of a family structure. And so as much as we like to talk about it and criticize ourselves for it, the fact is that it is not going to be something that we can fix overnight. And you may say 2 years is a long time, and I agree with you. I spend every week, every awake hour strategizing, discussing, meeting, but it's going to take a long time. Our police force, I am satisfied, is doing a creditable job. We have provided them with the materials that they need to get the job done. I have to thank the ministers of finance, both the substantial minister and the minister of state, for the fact that they have provided for us the resources that we need in order to maximize the police's participation in the fight against crime. And I think that we've seen, or people who live in communities where we have saturated them with police officers, where they have been serviced by the urban renewal policemen, have shown a distinct difference and improvement, both in terms of the behavior of their children and in terms of their relationship with the police. Now, when we say that, people's mind just go back to the murders. But the truth of the matter is that we are making progress, significant progress. And I am personally satisfied that we are on the right track. We have also done what people have been reluctant to do, and that is that we've gone out into the public. I've carried my commissioner of police, the leader of the defense force, the commodore, the superintendent of the prison, and we've gone out and talked to these communities. And people are telling us what they think is wrong. And we are listening to their suggestions. And we've been able to implement some of the suggestions that have been made to us, which have made a difference. For example, South Beach, pools, and that whole area used to be a crime-infested area where people go in the middle of the night, where people have been raped, and where there have been other forms of criminal activity, and where boats filled with illegal immigrants have been coming in. From the time we have established a South Beach base, all of that has stopped. And that was a good example of one of the suggestions that we got from members of the general public that we followed. Marco's Law has been introduced, and I know my friend is going to ask me, when are we going to implement it? It's on the way. We're just getting the regulations completed. We've had meetings with school children, thousands of them, senior school children. We've had meetings with the clergy, both in New Providence and in the Family Islands, and we've had meetings with other members of the civil society. Ladies and gentlemen, without a partnership between the civil society and ourselves and the police, we are not going to be able to solve the problem. And the reason why the problem hasn't been solved yet is because it is not easy, but it is on the way. We've engaged the Royal Bahamas Defense Force to assist us in the fight against crime. Even though they consider themselves the military, I have to say that the Defense Force officers have done an extremely impressive job. And the truth of the matter is that they have a very mammoth task to fulfill themselves, protecting our borders, protecting against poachers, intercepting and illegal immigrants, human smugglers, gun smugglers who are plying through our islands. We have a very serious job to do, and a very difficult job to do. In fact, we are one of the few countries in the world that has the challenges that we have. And when we came to office, we found that the boats that the Defense Force owns and operates have not been in the best of conditions. So we have had to bite the bullet and commit $232 million to get the vessels that we need to begin to do the job properly as we must. But they're not going to be enough. They're not going to be enough. I'm going to have to go back to the Minister of Finance and ask him for monies either for helicopters or for drones. I see he's leaning back now. But the truth of the matter is we have to have a full complement of the implements and the instruments that we need to protect our borders. But the Defense Force, as I indicated, are doing a great job. We've got responsibility for the prison. We have a prison where our population hovers around 1,500 a day. Half of those people who are in prison have not been convicted of anything. They've been charged. They may have even been offered bail, but they cannot, because they cannot pay their bail, more than half of them, or around half of them, are incarcerated. So that's the first thing we have to fix. And the government is doing so, because what we have decided is that we have to find a way to get people to trial earlier so that their cases can be discharged earlier and we can get out of prison those who should not be there. One of the problems we have with these murders, as you know, is that the majority of them by far are being done by young men between the age of 15 and 25. And oh yes, we have people in prison on remand right now in that age group who are charged with murder. And whenever they get bail, the reason they get bail is because the judges say that they cannot guarantee them a trial in a reasonable period. And so some of them get released on bail. And whenever that happens, we find that most of the violent crimes in our society today are due to some of those persons. And so unless and until we can get control of that aspect of law enforcement, we're not really going to be able to make the impact that we should be making with the tools that we have now. And so, ladies and gentlemen, crime is reducible. I'm satisfied. The energies that we're putting into it, for example, now we're introducing a new program this week in the high school. Students from T.A. Thompson Junior High School and C.C. Sweeting Senior High School, who have been warring on the streets of New Providence for several weeks now. We are taking some of them, the ones who have the greatest disciplinary problems, out of the school system. We are introducing them to a shock treatment package, which means that we take them out of school and we take them for 3 days and we expose them to what it is like, what life is like for persons who continue to operate the way they are operating. They're going to spend time sleeping in Central Station. They're going to spend time in the prison. And they're going to come up against some of the things that criminals come up against. But we're not only showing them the bad side of things, we're also going to show them what life would be like for them if they would just obey the law. And so what we're doing, we're exposing them to some of the packages at BTVI, how they can learn a skill. We're taking them over to Atlantis to show them how people are when they can work long enough to take a vacation. And we're taking them to the airport, the brand new airport, for them to see what it's like to go away, to go off the island. And so these are some of the issues, or these are some of the strategies that we are implementing. We're getting the support of parents and the school system, and we are very hopeful that over the course of the next year or so, we will begin to see a positive result from these strategies.
Just before, in Cabinet, when a minister makes a particular point, and that the point could be supplemented. What I would like to just say with respect to what Dr. Nottage has just said is that he identified a big challenge to the justice system on the part of people who are let out on bail because they could not be tried in a reasonable period of time. The Deputy Prime Minister, the Minister of Works, has just advised me that our commitment to have 10 courts functioning at the same time, criminal courts, that the furnishings are being put into the courts now, and that he anticipates that the problem that Dr. Nottage identified as a problem will be addressed significantly by having these courts function at the same time. And I think the Acting Attorney General, the Damian Gomez, Minister of Legal Affairs, would be able to say that the Juries Act is being shaped and fashioned now for first reading in Parliament, where we are amending the Juries Act again to make the system of justice, to enable it to conform more with the requirements and the challenges that we now face. Just before we throw this open to those of you for questions, I wanted the Minister of Education, Dr. Nottage, spoke about behavior of young people and meeting with young people. The Minister of Education was at a conference in Washington, and I had him fly back to Nassau today. And I just wish him to speak to where we are with respect to education, children, the school.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I'd like to start in education with a quote from the Prime Minister, which he gave in 2012. And he said that education, not money, is the cure to poverty, and likewise, education, not jails, are the solution to crime. I continue to reflect on this as it is a reminder of the moral and social imperative that education plays in our national development. Our Charter for Governance and the speech from the throne laid out a number of commitments from the government which we deemed important with regard to addressing some of the challenges faced in our educational system over the years. I will go through those. The first was the strengthening of our national literacy and numeracy plans, and we addressed that initially by increasing our contact periods for reading and mathematics for grade 1 through 3 and revising the curriculum so that we were able to have reading increased by 100% and mathematics by 50%. Inclusive of that, of course, was the commitment to expand our preschools, and I will get to that shortly. The next commitment was the introduction of the Standardized National High School Diploma, which established numerous standards of proficiency for high schoolers in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. In February of 2014, Cabinet approved the requirements for the introduction of Standardized High School Diploma to be introduced in September of 2014, and the first graduates in June 2017 from this students going to grade 10 this year. Inclusive of that was the development also of a national regulatory framework to establish at secondary school level a system of career path academies so that we could have a seamless transition from high school into the workforce or into technical and vocational professions. That is happening now at C.C. Sweeting and at many other high schools, and we will begin the expansion of that this year. We committed to provide legislation for the University of the Bahamas. This is well on course, and we expect that by the end of 2015, we will have legislation before us for the University of the Bahamas. Regulations, we committed to regulations to be developed to establish and oversee new standards for preschool and early childhood education. The Charter for Governance said that we would expand our preschools. In the 2 years since we have been in government, we have increased the number of seats for preschools throughout the Commonwealth by almost 300. And this year, we will see another increase of 200 seats. The amendments to the Early Childhood Act in 24 and regulations were passed in December 2013, and the council was appointed to govern preschools and daycare centers by Cabinet last month. BTVI we also recognize the important role that BTVI plays in our development, in the training and retraining of qualified Bahamian workers. In October of last year, we appointed the Council of the Bahamas Technical Vocational Institute, headed by Mr. Felix Stubb. We increased enrollment over the past 2 years by almost 30%, in 2 years, based on a concentrated effort to ensure that our programs align with our national development and the provision of financial aid and scholarships which were not done prior to 2012. Those were the things that we mentioned in our Charter for Governance and in the speech for the throne. And as I stated, the only one that has not been completed to date is the University of the Bahamas, but it's well on the way, and we committed that we will have that done by 2015. I'll just touch on 2 or 3 other issues or areas where we deem important in education, but were not covered in our Charter for Governance or the speech for the throne. I want to start with the critical issue of establishing a policy position for education moving forward, and what we called our Shared Vision for Education 2030, which was a bipartisan approach to the policy initiatives of education moving forward for the next 15 years. We got the Education Committee side of which is headed by President Sharon Wilson, who's President of the Senate, and the Political Committee headed by myself, which includes past ministers of education from all of the political parties and inclusive of Mr. Branville McCartney. We received a draft of that policy position about 2 months ago, and we expect to receive the final draft in June of this year, after which it will be presented to Cabinet and then to Parliament. And so we expect by the end of this year, the end of 2014, we will have a policy position on education which will move us for the next 15 years, which is agreed by stakeholders in education throughout the country and agreed by politicians across the political divide. Secondly, I want to touch on something which is dear to the Prime Minister and dear to the PLP, and that is our focus on special needs children in our country and the role that education has to play for them. As you are aware, we've established the Special Needs School at Our Ladies, where we will conduct testing, research, training, and teaching, and we have no doubt, based on what we see, that it will be the envy of our region. In December of last year, we tabled a national standard for inclusive education. This was prepared by the Special Education Unit within the Ministry of Education, and other stakeholders, was supported by an IDB grant and governed. We were governed by UNESCO principles for students with special needs. The Professional Development Institute at Mabel Walker, also a major initiative for us, where the Institute will seek to align policy and practices to build leadership and capacity to deliver change at all levels in education and improve the delivery of services to the public, particularly students, and generally to increase effectiveness and efficiency within my ministry. Finally, I want to touch on technology. Since May of 2012, this government led by Perry Gladstone Christie has invested over $4 million in technology in high schools. $4 million. In doing so, we have impacted 95% of all junior and senior high schools throughout the country, updated their computer labs, and inputted state-of-the-art technology. We're in the process now of increasing bandwidth into every school and working very closely with BTC and Cable Bahamas to effect that and to move our campuses to wireless campuses. So in closing, I just want to say that we have accomplished a lot in 2 years in education. We have tackled some very difficult areas that have confronted educators in some instances for over 15 years. We, however, are not resting on our laurels. We understand now that we have set the foundation, but now we're in the implementation, assessment, and measuring stage of our rollout. I'm satisfied, though, that we have set the foundation, and we remain committed and vigilant that we will see improved academic performance in our schools. As the Minister for National Security said, it will not be overnight, but I can assure you, assure the Bahamian public, that when it comes to education, the Prime Minister of the country and the Cabinet have given me every support that I have requested to improve education throughout our Commonwealth. I want to just make a final point on the matter addressed by Dr. Bernard Nottage with regard to suspension and expulsion from school. I, too, have taken a very strong stance against it within our school system. And just recently, I met with the Prime Minister and a group from the private sector to form a public-private partnership amongst some of the leading church leaders in the country so that we can develop a holistic approach to the programs that children who are suspended or expelled go into, inclusive of ensuring that they get the right type of attention and the right type of help depending on what the issue is facing them. So I'm very optimistic about what the future holds for education. I think we have accomplished a lot in a relatively short space of time, but I accept that there's a lot of hard work ahead. I'm committed to it, and I have the full support of the Cabinet and the Prime Minister to do that. Thank you.
I'll just speak to you very briefly on what we are doing in terms of trying to get our workforce prepared for the many opportunities that we expect to come on board, and those that have actually started already. We recognize for some time now that one of the greatest challenges facing our young people is their inability to obtain jobs because of the basic training needed in order to qualify themselves for these jobs. And as you know, the National Training Agency was established in August of last year officially, where we actually passed legislation in Parliament creating a statutory body. The agency, as you know, is charged with training those persons who we consider to be most at risk in terms of finding suitable employment for young people between the ages of 18 to 25. And of course, because of the high demand for persons just above that age category, we have also extended it to persons just beyond that age. We've already started to see the benefits of training these individuals. Well, we've already seen more than 100 of them actually find employment as a direct result of the training that they would have received through the National Training Agency. We've partnered with quite a number of the employers who have seen the importance and have come on board and supported our efforts in trying to work along with us with several very important initiatives that would help to assist us in this endeavor. As you're aware, we had our first graduation exercise in January of this year, where we had just around 450 young persons who graduated through the National Training Agency. We have since launched in Grand Bahama, where we started our second session here in Nassau, and our first session has started in Grand Bahama as well. We've already identified and have employed on the ground persons in Abaco and Exuma, along with Andros, where we intend to launch in those areas within the next couple months. One of the things that we try to do initially is we actually take the trainees through what we call a workforce mandatory preparation program. What we found is that most of the young employees who lose their jobs lose it as a direct result of the bad attitudes that they have on the job. And this is something that came directly from the employers. The important thing about this initiative, it is supported by the employers and employees organizations, who are both stakeholders and partners with us every step along the way. So the programs that we are designing, they are designed as the direct result of the input that we would have had from the employers and employees organizations. And so this is something that we thought was very important. And what is significant in this is that just last week, we had the board actually appointed a few weeks ago, and last week they actually held their first meeting. And so the National Training Agency is really designed to be an autonomous organization where they conduct their own affairs, they generate their own income, and they're able to give us the support that we need without having to go directly through a government's ministry. Mr. Pierre Dupuche, as you may know, was actually appointed as the chairman of the National Training Agency, and we are very excited about what is happening. We had our first meeting with him before he had his board meeting last week, and he is already coming up with some initiatives to make sure that he enhances what we had actually intended to do initially. And so we look forward to going on with this program, where initially we agreed that we would only start with 4 core areas, and that's the hospitality and tourism, the retail operations and sales, auto service, and also the office procedures. And as we build on the program, we will expand those sessions, those training to more areas, and those areas that we know we have a critical need for training young people throughout the Bahamas. Thank you.
Yeah, we will now offer our ministers to you, the media here assembled, for questions. Having heard from our Prime Minister, the Right Honorable Perry Gladstone Christie, on a general overview of the improvements being done to our economy and the components that are fundamental to the upliftment of our Bahamian people. That is safety, crime by Minister of National Security, hearing about education and what is being done to assist our people to ensure that they're prepared for the workforce and the work and the number of jobs that's being created. We now open the floor for questioning.
Thank you, sir. Clint Watson from ZNS Network, the news leader. And of course, my question goes to Prime Minister Christie, and that simply is, perhaps this is the 2-year anniversary in office. No doubt people are grading. What would you give your administration if you had to offer a grade? What would you give your administration, considering the fact that we've not seen you do any cabinet shuffle? Are you satisfied with the work of your ministers? What grade would you give your administration? That will be the first question that we'll allow you to respond to.
Well, you know, firstly, we're elected for 5 years. And so in the context of grades, I'm grading performance in the context of what I know we have achieved. And invariably, people are not aware of the extent to which I can now speak. I'm happy with my ministers. We've had our challenges. For example, today I was speaking with ministers about the question of mortgage relief. And I was speaking with the Minister of State for Finance. And that we do not see that as a failing or a failure. We see that we've had to recalibrate our approach to it because we still remain convinced that we have to make an intervention on behalf of homeowners, and we remain convinced that we have to broaden the amount of attorneys who, with insurance and everything else, can have their clients retain them and the banks provide mortgages. These are issues that came up that we have to review, and we are talking with the bank. So we have issues like that. I really feel, and Dr. Nottage, you've heard him speak on crime, that I want to be satisfied that we have established a unit in the police at the police headquarters where they subject every crime to analysis of what I call a situations room, and I want that room to be able to feed public policy. Those are things that so now, having said those things, I'm satisfied that where we are today, people will begin to see the results and very quickly. And you know, it's not easy because you have ministers around this table, for example, the Minister of Tourism, and I know you might want to ask me about VAT, you want to ask me about gaming. You have the Minister here responsible for transport, in terms of all areas where there's dynamic movement in terms of new policies, new initiatives, any one of which we can speak to now. So I'm happy with my crew. Now I'm not going to give A, B, C, D, and G. That's not for me. I'm happy because I believe that we are to serve the Bahamian people, and we are serving them, I think, as best we can up to this point.
Okay. My second question then, sir, is, of course, the topic that's up for discussion now, value-added tax. Are we going to see value-added tax implemented under your administration? If so, when? Well, and do you feel Bahamians can accommodate that?
Yes. I think the first point I should make on behalf of colleagues is that we have an incredible demand for infrastructural improvement and to stop infrastructural deterioration, and therefore new sources of revenue are required. I think there's no doubt about that. In talking about tax reform, we made a commitment to introduce greater levels of efficiency in collection of taxes, even to the point where we're privatizing the collection of some taxes. And so you can therefore see the benefits of that. With respect to value-added tax, specifically, the government of the Bahamas has been discussing value-added tax for some time. The Ministry of Finance had indicated that as of July 1st, it would introduce value-added tax. I made an intervention at the instance of a coalition for reform, taxation reform, where they indicated they would wish to present to the government an alternative in the form of, they thought, payroll taxes. So we gave them the time to do that. We believe that they are about to submit their report. But as you know, we brought a New Zealand group in. And I want to be able to say this. The New Zealand group met with the cabinet, presented their position to the cabinet. They met with people in Grand Bahama. They met with stakeholders here in New Providence. And by and large, they did a great job in being able to communicate what the New Zealand model was all about. From our point of view, I'm able to say that we are not going to have value-added tax at 15%. I said that before. We are going to have a significantly reduced value-added tax. I believe it is fair for me to say, notwithstanding having seen the report of the coalition, that we are going to have value-added tax. And I'd like to believe that when we do have it, that we will be very close to having agreement with the coalition on what we present. I met with them last night in my office and had a very dynamic discussion. And I told my colleagues today, those discussions will continue because I've reached the point now where, as Minister of Finance, I have to bring to my colleagues the legislation and the form of the legislation that we are going to introduce. And I would wish there to be as near to unanimity amongst the business community as there could be. And so therefore meetings will continue, but we are moving forward. And so the position being, yes, value-added tax, yes, a reduced version of value-added tax, and one that I think will be acceptable to the business community.
Is there a target date, sir?
No. Again, last night we discussed all of the implications of dates and timing. What we want to do is to ensure that the people who the tax will serve understand it, and therefore we want to give sufficient time for that understanding to be put in place.
All right. Good afternoon, Greg Smith, JCN News. And this question is directed to the Prime Minister, just to be clear. So we have no target date
so
for
who are you?
Greg Smith, JCN News.
JCN?
Yes, sir.
Right.
We have no target date for,
yes,
for the implementation of
value-added tax. The target date is this, so that you understand. My government is committed to being able to deliver to the Bahamian people services that require additional revenue. But we know that we do not want to impose a tax that people find difficult because they do not understand it. And so we are committed to ensuring that whatever we introduce, right, the people have had an opportunity to fully understand it. And so in the very near future, the government will make its final decision. And so that you know that in addition to the coalition having consultants, the government has a Washington firm that is ready to report with its recommendation that we will publish. And that you will see for yourself the government's reasoning on value-added tax, why we're going to do it, and at what level we're coming in.
Right. When can we expect the legalization of web shops?
I can tell you, but I would wish, as this is a cabinet and there's a portfolio responsibility, I would wish the minister responsible for gaming to speak to the issue.
Your question?
When can we expect the legalization of web shops?
July 1st.
That's
July 1st, that's the date. we intend to proceed. We've been working assiduously. I think we have to understand this in context. We are not the first to seek to cause this to be regularized, the web shops. The former administration had prepared legislation. Legislation was prepared for 2010. And they prepared the way in which to regularize the web shops. And so we've been working with legislation proposed by the former administration, legislation that we've looked at from our consultants that have come in, and we've been talking with the web shop owners and all the others. The truth is we're working assiduously to ensure that we can make the date. I think the Prime Minister made it very clear that revenue is a concern of the Bahamas government, and so our efforts are to ensure that we can move as quickly as possible. Additionally, I think it's important because we've been asked questions about what's on the table, what's not on the table. The truth is everything's on the table, but what is the steps that we take? What's the first step as opposed to the second and the third? There are many options, including the National Lottery. That is an option, as was presented by the Minister responsible for sports, because I think you'd remember when we had the debate initially, he had spoken very strongly about the need to ensure that we can cause for greater funding for sports and for culture. So it's not the first step, but the option is still there.
Okay. My last two questions would be directed to Minister Brian Nottage.
What's that? Yeah.
Mr. Nottage.
Just let me supplement what the Minister has said here. That in everything the Minister does with respect to gaming, we will be advising the Bahamian people. With respect to the whole concept, I think it should be noted that the casino gamings, the Hotel Corporation, is the owner of the license and it subcontracts to casino operators. So that position is under consideration by the Minister as well as to the whole mechanism or the instrument by which web shops are regulated will be controlled by a government-controlled license, and therefore it determines who is fit and proper to receive those licenses. The second point to supplement the Minister really is that the Minister has to set a dead drop date. He set a dead drop date with the accounting year. That requires obviously amendment to the laws, but it requires in terms of casino or web shop operators, where you require them to have an accounting firm, you require them to make submissions based on what their assets are, their intake is, their play is, and it is upon that that you tax. The requirement of licensing will involve a very serious implication if, when we audit their accounts, they were not accurate in what they said to us. So the Minister, in terms of a drop-dead date, is right to set a target for the government, and that target date is July 1st. Dr. Nottage?
Yes, sir.
Yes, good afternoon. Were any decisions made regarding the jailhouse wedding, the officers that were involved in that? Because the Commissioner of Police recommended that charges be brought.
It is my understanding that the Commissioner of Police submitted a report to the Governor General as is required by the law, and the matter is under consideration.
Okay. All right, final question. And you mentioned Marco's Law is underway. Are you able to provide a time frame as to when we could expect this?
As you know, Marco's Law has been passed. I intend to sign the assent shortly, but when I do, I wish the regulations to be available, and I'm just waiting for those regulations, which are being prepared by the Attorney General's office.
Good afternoon, my name is Travis Garrett from the Nassau Guardian. Prime Minister, question is for you. The FNM has described your government as having a lackluster performance, specifically with your legislative focus, and they said you lack that. Specifically, they raised that point because the constitutional referendum, which is due at the end of June, you had said previously, if I remember correctly, We're hearing that that may not happen. But my question is, when can we expect that referendum?
The position is the Cabinet of the Bahamas has given consideration to the referendum bills. The Constitutional Commission has then taken the position to the leader of the opposition and his party. They have given consideration to the bills. They have taken a position on that. The bills have gone back to the lawyers, and the lawyers now have to fashion it and bring it back to the Cabinet for final approval, which will then go to the House of Assembly.
Do you expect,
so the process, I expect, therefore, that to be done imminently.
but when do you expect the referendum to take place?
As soon as we are able to know that we have signed off on the bills, we will set a date for the referendum. But the point is, you started off by saying the FNM described us as lackluster.
Yeah,
Do you know,
92
when you say FNM, who you're talking about? You're talking about the party that got beaten. You're talking about ministers one by one who were toppled. That's what you're talking about. You're talking about a party that is scrapping right now. See, and don't listen, there is some stunning arrogance in the political domain by those of you who determine what the political status is all about. Each one of these members who are elected here represent a constituency, and to presume that they do not know their constituents and not in touch with their constituents is an extraordinary kind of thing. I find it absolutely amazing. Lackluster? We are working hard. We're having dramatic results. And of course, the FNM shouldn't just say it. They should get up in Parliament where we can answer back. Right? There's no muttering on this. We are accountable for all that we do. And I want you to look around the table, each one of us here. Each one of us will be able to stand on their own feet, on our own feet. And we are very comfortable with that. And we are going to keep on going. What's your next question?
My next question is, Minister Gibson revealed last week that Holiday Industrial had been awarded a $20 million contract. It's for you, Prime Minister. I want to ask you first. I want to ask you first.
I want you to answer the question, and then I will answer it.
Well, first of all, I wanted to ask you if you thought it was fair that this contract, first of all...
Listen to me. I want the Bahamian people to hear what the minister responsible who brought it to Cabinet says about it. And then I will tell you what the Prime Minister did on top of what he did.
Fair enough.
You want the truth?
Fair enough.
If you want the truth, let's get the truth right now. Minister.
What's the question?
Well, my first question is, why was that contract, you said that contract was the contract for the new Ministry of National Security on JFK? Mm-hmm. You said that contract was awarded last year and it was sent out to, I think, selective tendering. Why wasn't the public made aware of that?
Well, first of all, I never said that the contract was awarded last year because it wasn't. The contract was just awarded several months ago, during 2013, so that's misinformation. 2014, sorry, not 2013. Secondly, there are several ways you could award contracts. And I drew to the public's attention last week. Take the building that's a replica, this is a replica of. That building, the contract was initially given to Holiday Industrial, which is Reverend Lloyd Smith. They then terminated the contract, and in the contract they terminated him without cause. He put in several payment certificates. They paid one and they refused to pay the rest. They then terminated the contract. He then, like every other contractor, said, as soon as you pay me the balance of my money, I'll release the supplies that I bought for the contract. They said no. It went to arbitration. Arbitration decided that they owed Holiday Industrial just under $700,000, to which they paid. At no time during that discussion did the issue ever arise about whether or not there was shoddy workmanship on the job. So they then terminated the contract and entered into negotiations as directed by the Minister of Finance at the time with Jones Construction Company. They never went out to tender. In this case, like in other cases within the government, we select a group of contractors, which was 4 in this case, and we allowed them to bid on the job. In the case of the now Attorney General office, it didn't go to tender. They terminated the contract with Reverend Lloyd Smith. At that time, he had $4.6 million left in the contract, and he had a performance bond. They then gave the contract to Jones Construction for $8.6 million. So right away, they gave away $4 million. No negotiations, no tender exercise. They just plucked Jones Construction out of there and say, give them a contract for $8.6 million. Now, you have different ways you can go to tender. You can, number one, have negotiations, where you negotiate. In the case, that's what they did with the Office of the Attorney General, which is a replica building. Number two, you can advertise in the papers and ask anybody to apply. Or number three, you could go to a list of contractors and you could say, these 6 contractors can bid on this job. In this case, we decided that we will go to selective tendering. In that case, they didn't go. They just negotiated.
Now, Minister, just let me supplement that. And I want to be able to refer to the Deputy Prime Minister. A Prime Minister and Minister of Finance participating in such an award has the discretion which I exercise, and I do so with respect to all such contracts, to have the Minister of Works, the Deputy Prime Minister, and the engineers of the Ministry of Works to certify and make the accuracy and the reasonableness of the price. That was referred to the Deputy Prime Minister, and the Deputy Prime Minister authorized an investigation. I want to put this to a point because it is amazing that people could take an issue, magnify it, when you know it was given to somebody without going to tender. And I have to presume you know, and I presume you don't care. You only care when it's awarded by the PLP.
Prime Minister, you're correct. And hence my comment that most of these issues fanned by the media causes the concerns in our community.
But speak to
because this issue in particular, the matter was referred to my ministry. We had a meeting with all of my technical officers. We looked at the numbers. We revised all the numbers. And we then said this price, the value for what's going to be built, is reasonable and meets the appropriate accepted construction standard. The question of Mr. Lloyd Smith, Holiday Construction, being competent to build was also raised and investigated by my ministry. And yes, when we look at the replica building where the Attorney General's office is now, what I discovered was the contract was originally awarded for around $14 million to Holiday Construction, that his contract was terminated, and I say unlawfully, hence he was able to take the government to arbitration and succeed in that arbitration and was awarded a sum of monies. Now that same building, a contract was awarded without negotiation to another contractor
by the FNM government.
Right? And up to, it was only just completed very recently, with other contractors having to be engaged. If you look at the process as to why the building eventually cost over around $30 million, how you, as an investigator, you can raise an issue, cause it to be an issue, to try to create some scandal, to say that here goes an award of a contract by the PLP to a contractor that does shoddy work, and he had to be terminated. Well, if you look at the facts, examine what the facts.
You could have gone.
See, the rabbit. Farmer got the gun.
All right.
You see, and the new project manager. If you dig, and see what happened to that building, you realize there was a new project manager who went there, who fired Mr. Smith.
Well, considering
that's what the point is. So you also go and ask, come and see me, so I can tell you why and how. The contract was awarded to Mr. Smith was 14 million. How it got to 28 million?
Well, considering all of this...
I just one other point. I anticipated that this would happen sitting around the table. You've been around long enough and you know these things would happen. You anticipate it. So you just do all the necessary work to ensure integrity in the process, and you wait for you to raise your head. All right? And that's what we did. But we go further. I see this question of selective tendering. If you really want to find out how that works, just go and review what the F&M did in their previous term. You'll then see how that works magnificently for them. And so, you know, the point is, okay?
Prime Minister.
No, but I just one last point of that, right? What I find interesting as well is that they terminated Holiday Industrial for no cause, which they admit to, and they had to pay through arbitration.
That's right.
If you remember, there's a company called Maljack, right? That did a lot of shoddy work at Galvantine School. They also did shoddy work in Andros, and they promised they'll never work again. They were actually terminated for cause. See, in Holiday Industrial case, they said they terminated him without cause. In this case, they terminated him for cause. Well, I'm going to be tabling in the Parliament tomorrow the contracts that he got since he was terminated for cause by the same administration. So they terminate Holiday Industrial without cause, and they want to make sure that he never work again in the country because they say he's not to work. When it is clear that he did what he was supposed to do, and at no time was he ever accused of this in writing, none. Even through arbitration, never accused of it.
I understand what you're all saying, but
I'm sure you do.
My question was, why wasn't this brought to the public's attention before last week?
It was.
I'm talking about Mr. Smith's contract for the new
It was. Well, how did it get to public attention?
When was it tabled?
No. These contracts are never tabled in Parliament like that.
Yeah.
But I can go through all of the national insurance contract, and only time those issues are raised if somebody raised the issue. But the contract, you don't table national insurance contract in Parliament. When was that? When did it happen last? When was the last time? Can you refresh my
memory? You said it was made public. When was it made public?
It was made public once persons asked about it. We then released the information.
I'm only asking, why didn't you bring that to the public's attention, considering what happened?
They quoted me in an article. It was me they quoted.
So I had called you and asked you about it, but I'm asking why wasn't the public made aware before that?
No, I'm saying it is not a part of the process where you announce these things prematurely. When we were ready to have the official groundbreaking, we would have done so.
Yes.
And so the contractor had already started doing the earthworks, and he was about to come out of the ground, and before they come out of the ground, we would normally do it. But it happened so that somebody asked about it before, and so we released the information, but it was under hide.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Write the story now.
Good afternoon. Notario McKinsey, Tribune Business. Prime Minister, I just wanted to find out, I have 3 questions very quickly. What has happened with the mortgage relief plan?
Thank you. As you know, the plan was in our Charter for Governance, and it included 2 main components, the mortgage relief plan I'm talking about. The first component was a commitment to sit with the banks and develop a plan to bring relief to homeowners. The second component was several points within the 10-point plan to bring legislation to Parliament to protect, number 1, to protect borrowers, which we have done, and secondly, to allow individuals who had savings in their pension plans to be able to access those, to be able to save their homes. Thirdly, we were to bring legislation to address the issue and the abuse, really, of the system of salary deductions, where workers in this country, we take home really a small percentage, in many cases, of their income, and hence are not able to meet their obligations. As far as the legislation is concerned, for allowing individuals to have access to their pensions, allowing for the protection of homeowners, and as well allowing for the regulation of the system of salary deductions. That legislation has been introduced. It's in committee. We committed to continue our consultation with the banks in order that we can come to an agreeable position. We expect that during this upcoming budget period, we'll be in a position to move that legislation out of committee and eventually into enactment. As far as the other components, working with the banks, I want to say right here, because it has come up and it has been the subject of comment, that this whole plan was some false promise by the Progressive Liberal Party. In the Charter for Governance, we made the commitment to sit with the banks and derive a plan that we can both, the government and the clearing banks and other lenders, can agree on. We did that. We had extensive discussions with them. We derived a set of criteria in conjunction with the clearing banks associations whereby individuals will qualify. As we moved through the process and the whole process of qualification began, what became apparent that was not even apparent to the banks was the level of indebtedness of individuals, particularly consumer loans. And so we found that, notwithstanding the good faith efforts of the Clearing Banks Association and of the government, very few individuals were able to qualify under that system. And so it brought to light to us the really scandalous nature of consumer lending and lending practices, not only by some commercial banks but by unregulated lenders, which we are addressing. The issue of the level of debt unknown even to the banks. And so we will be progressing with the implementation of a credit bureau so that more information can be shared amongst financial institutions. And so we have committed to move on the legislative front to bring that protection, and we continue to work with the banks on an individual basis, making interventions. And we expect, as the Prime Minister said, that this is an ongoing process. We must put this within the context of making a commitment in the Charter for Governance, sitting down with all the interested parties, deriving a plan, discovering, unfortunately, some flaws where the amount of relief that we anticipated based on information received from the other stakeholders, we weren't able to affect as many as we could. But as the Prime Minister said, it's an ongoing process. We'll be moving the legislation through Parliament, and we'll be re-examining this as we go forward.
And I just want to say that there are some things you're able to do right away. There are others where you have to stop and sit with the institutions concerned with a view to saying, look, we are very serious about this. Help us find the right formula. Since you object to this particular provision, let us find the right formula, because the government of the Bahamas, we are committed to finding the formula to help people who have these grave difficulties, and it's very unfair to them. And other countries have found a way to pass legislation of a similar nature to help their citizens, and we believe we should do the same thing. So we've been elected for 5 years, and sometimes we have to sort of stop and change course and come back to what we're doing, but we are determined in the best interest of the people of this country to ensure that we bring some relief in that area. What's your other point?
My final question. When can we expect to see another player or players in the cellular market with BTC's monopoly?
The first point I should make with respect to liberalization is that our predecessors in government signed agreements that prevented us from dealing with this matter before the April 6th. We were only released to deal with this matter on the 6th of April, and thereafter we moved to create a task force that will guide the way. We have set really targets for ourselves. We want to do this as quickly as possible to have competition in the marketplace, and we are about to announce the task force, and they're about to release really the position that they would wish the public to see in terms of times and dates and events. So you can look forward to Mrs. Miller and her team being announced formally, where you can meet them and they will present to you what they propose to do in association with IRCA.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Tanika Thompson from the Nassau Guardian. Prime Minister, just tying back onto that BTC issue, can you tell us when the MOU will be tabled in Parliament about the BTC deal, the transfer of shares from cable and wireless to the payment people?
That really is a question that the leader of government business in the House could be able to more accurately tell us in terms of the House agenda.
We are likely to table it as soon as we go on to a new agenda. Right now we've got a number of matters, as you know, that we are completing. I think that'll take us another week or so. And when the memorandum is ready, we will bring it to Parliament right away.
And so when will the deal be finalized? I know the issue hadn't been wrapped up yet.
Oh, yeah. I think we are in the final stages of that. I think we have done it, and it has just gone to lawyers. And so at this level, we're finished with what we have to do. And so it's a question of now lawyers on both sides settling the matter, and it will be released.
And Prime Minister, yesterday, Mr. Davis basically accused the media of fanning the flames in terms of taking delight in the crime issue. I want to know, Prime Minister, if you had any regrets that the PLP made such a big issue about the murders by putting those billboards up before the election, and now you're saying that we're taking delight in making the issue, I guess, such a prominent one.
You want to know if
If you have any regrets that the PLP made the murder issue such a prominent one before the election by putting up those billboards?
I think we must all learn in the light of our experiences. I passed the stage of whether there's regret. Whether I would do it again, the answer is no. You don't regret in that sense. You move on and you learn. I think tonight you will find that the Free National Movement will speak on crime. They may well be incendiary in their language. Will they regret it? I don't know. That's going to be the question you ask them. The point is, we have accepted, acknowledged, and you've heard Dr. Nottage present very eloquently today, that crime is a matter for all, that he expects everybody to man up on this issue, and that we must move forward. And so the best I can tell you is that if I were faced with the same circumstances and I had to make the decision, I wouldn't do it again.
Mm-hmm. And do you think the matter with Darren Cash's home, and his home was searched and some items were seized, do you think that was handled properly, because the FNM is saying it was a political witch hunt?
I have no... I think, you may warn the Minister of National Security. I'm not aware, and no one would have come to me to say that they have a warrant or they're searching anybody's home. That doesn't happen that way. I was accused of that when Code Smith and Fred Smith. Fred Smith actually came out and said, I knew. I had no idea of what was taking place when it was Code Smith and Fred Smith in this issue. I have no idea about this. I heard Darren Cash spoke about me sending my cousin Wade Christie to manage the bank. I had no idea that Wade Christie was going. We don't get in those kinds of things. I think the central bank must have sent Wade Christie there because he was formerly the Bank of Nova Scotia. But these fellows should try and recognize who their supporters are. You see, I mean, I don't want to talk about my cousin like that. But the point is, saying I sent him. If I saw Darren Cash's wife today, tomorrow, I wouldn't know who she is. So, for me, right, it is just something that doesn't arise. It never concerned me. I was never consulted on it. I don't know about it. It's not within my terms of reference. It's a police matter, and it will remain a police matter, and the police must be accountable for what they do.
For the record, let me say that we are not like them. Because the only reason they think that we send the police there is because perhaps that's what they would do. But I've been in public life too long for people to place upon me things that never even entered my consciousness. How would I know the police is going to raid or to search someone's house? I won't know that. I never asked about it. And nobody offered to tell me. And if they offered to tell me, I'll tell them I don't want to know. Because I like to speak truth. So I'm serious about that. I felt it was a foolish statement because one thing, the leader of the opposition, he knows me very well. It's not my style.
And my last question, Mr. Gibson, can you clarify, are you going to table tomorrow the contract that Lloyd Smith got, the new $20 million contract?
That is not something we do. That's not something we do. I mean, I think the press wanted to know, for their own edification, the persons who bid, the companies who bid on the job. But I have never. Have you seen it before where they table these things in Parliament? No. So why would you want me to do it now?
Because you're the government, I'm asking you.
No, I'm saying that's not something we do. You know, can somebody in the public please remind me the last time you saw a contract given over national insurance table in Parliament? Can somebody tell me?
By any minister.
By any minister. By this administration, the previous one, or the one before that.
And tell me the journalists who you saw asked for one when they were in power. I'd like to know that too.
Yeah. Because I want to know which journalists asked as well for them to do it.
Good afternoon, Ava Turnquest, the Tribune. Three questions. They'll be quick. And with crime being as high as it is, and the police doing all these new strategies, I was wondering. Tomorrow makes a full year since the ruling that Aaron Roll was unlawfully killed in police custody. The matter hasn't been taken to the next step yet. My question for anyone who will take it is that with the situation with crime being so high and the tensions between and the stated intention to create more bridges between the community and the police and all the law enforcement agencies, how important is it to be seen to be active or doing enough in against police complaints when we have issues from the community, claims that they've been harassed by police or that they've been beaten while in custody. Here we have a situation where the court ruled that this killing was unlawful, but it hasn't moved yet. I was wondering if there was any consideration by the government about this.
That when cases are brought before the court is a matter for the Attorney General's office. I'm not able to answer that. I can tell you, though, that I am extremely sensitive to this whole question of the relationship between the police and communities and the complaints which are made against the conduct of policemen. And I insist in my discussions with the leadership of the police force that the Complaints and Corruption Unit investigate these matters. We have an independent committee that hears matters of that kind and makes decisions, and we leave it to them. We don't get personally involved in this, but that's our policy.
And from the press side of it, when matters go to the tribunal, I know a lot of times some of the decisions or the rulings that they come up with aren't public or are dealt with internally. However, I was wondering if there was any or if there could be any reporting on how these matters, when they are resolved, how they were resolved, especially given the interest to the community. Sometimes the results or how they were resolved doesn't get back to the media. There's no real mechanism on how we can check up on these matters. I know it's an internal review system.
I think it should be a transparent system. And I would look and see what the rules and regulations are, but there's no reason why once a tribunal has reached a decision why it shouldn't be made public.
Okay. Also, my final question. I know there's been a lot of talk of more investment. You guys are working on bringing in more investment, and some already on the table. Question or contention that comes up a lot is the fact that the public isn't aware of these initiatives before the last letter is signed on the contract, or when it's still in a deliberative process where they can have some sort of input. Minister Wilchcombe has said that perhaps there needs to be some sort of committee established to be able to take. So when the ideas come, to be able to sort of go into the communities and have town meetings. But this, I feel, ties on to freedom of information. And can you speak to where the government is with enacting this legislation that we already have, that the government said they would review?
Yeah. No, this issue has come up amongst us. As you know, the Privy Council spoke to it on one of the cases that was taken to the Privy Council about the right of communities to be consulted. And so there's a very strong body of opinion within the government insistent on, in fact, consulting the community extensively to ensure that the community is at one with the investment. And I think if you looked at Bimini, I kept on saying We don't want a development where the people of Bimini will be looking through the window, and that we wanted them in the room of the development, actually to be a full part of it. Because in everything we do, we're trying to have something that is more than the creation of jobs. We want the community to have real opportunities, entrepreneurial opportunities, to own businesses in connection with the new development going in. So to answer your question, it is the right thing to do, to be able to ensure that we have full consultations with the community, and that the community is in agreement with what we're doing. And I think in all of the developments we do, particularly in the islands, where these are new interventions that could impact the way of life of people in those communities, that is a necessity. And interestingly enough, it's a good question, because it's a question that is being raised by people in the cabinet.
Across the sector, I was wondering, can we get a timeline for the enactment or any sort of
You're talking about
timeframe?
legislation?
The freedom of information.
You're talking about legislation?
Yes, the legislation that you, has been said to be now under review. It was already passed, but it was brought back and said to be under review.
Yeah, well, the Attorney General, I think, is supposed to meet with stakeholders on that in terms of consultation and bring back to us.
Okay. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Betty Vidrain from Bahamas Information Services. I have two questions, one for the Prime Minister, and maybe you may have to pass it on to the Minister of Tourism. You have spoken extensively about some of the major developments on the Family Islands and in New Providence, and I just wanted to know, to those persons in the community who believe that this business model of major developments kind of puts Bahamians out of the game, that Bahamians are not able to participate in the tourism industry or the hotel industry, what initiatives or incentives is the government putting in place to assist those Bahamians who may be interested in participating in the hotel industry? That's my first question.
Well, with respect to the first question, interestingly enough, building a hotel, or whether rooms in a hotel, towards building a hotel, obviously requires some capital. And with respect to funding, the Development Bank and other commercial banks are supposed to be there for those purposes. On Sunday, I visited Rose Island, and I inspected a 12-room hotel built by a man by the name of Tom Baisden, where it was just an extraordinary development that took 4 years to build, and to see it there, rating out, it's being furnished, and I indicated to him that when I come back I will have the press with me. But this is a model of what happens, and if you go through the islands, you find on an increasing basis more and more Bahamians building rooms that they let, and rooms that become small hotels. And in Exuma, in Meguana, you have Bahamians who actually own these. And I think the idea is, one, to incentivize that. The question has come up, can we put policies in place where we incentivize? And the answer is yes. There is a particular key in the Exumas operated by a Bahamian, and that it is something to see. All right, and we are incentivizing this gentleman because we would do the same thing for foreigners, to ensure that he is able to, and this is run by himself and the children, and it's just a wonderful thing to see. I don't want to identify him in that sense, but the idea is, yes, within the context of development for the country, we need investments that could create jobs. We need to be able to recognize that tourism is something that will be a sustainable economic activity, and that countries all over the world, most certainly in this region, are following the example of the Bahamas. It has become extraordinarily competitive now, and we have to ensure that we remain competitive. And I think one of the things that I've always said to my colleagues, that just today we had a very developed and complex discussion over one of the major entities in the country. All of them require some form of subsidy, some form of direct grant, some form of collaborative marketing from the government. And I don't think that we have enough conversations with the Bahamian people so that they can actually know what happens in these
resorts and how much money we put into these resorts, whether it's Club Med in San Salvador, whether it's Paradise Island, whether it's Bahama, and the requirements for the government to make substantial cash injections. And when we came to power, the FNM was spending over $25 million, I believe, on direct subventions into the tourism industry in Freeport. And we've cut it down to about 12 million now. But the fact of the matter is, these things happen, and we are faced with having to make decisions as to whether or not we could approve a particular development or keep a particular development open. Take Sandals. The owner with Sandals would come to us and say, we have 600-700 employees, but we've lost money for 3-4 consecutive years. What are you going to do to assist us? A government sit down and make a decision as to how we could go about doing it. This Minister of Tourism would say, okay, I don't want to get directly involved in making a grant to you, but I will join you in promoting the destination of Exuma. And so since you are bringing people into Exuma, I will divert, and listen, millions now, I will divert money to in the form of advertising to help. So that's happening. And whilst it's happening, we have to look at the opportunities that are there for Bahamians for them to participate in the industry. Another question?
Yes, the second question is directed to Minister Nordich. Am I correct when you said that the majority of murders are being committed by young males 15 to 25 years old?
By young males who are themselves on bail
right.
for violent crime of some kind. And yes, most of them are in that age group.
The reason why I'm trying to corner that is because in that 15 to 18, I guess they're supposed to be under their parents. So this question has to do with that. With crime being the complex issue that it is, and given all the measures that the government is putting in place to ensure that we combat it, what if any, the responsibilities that parents have in all of this? Is there anything or any measures that the government plans to take to make parents more accountable for those that group of persons?
Yes, we have. My ministry has had drafted a Parental Responsibility Act bill, the bill now, which we are in discussions with the Attorney General's office about, and which we would hope that we get the agreement to bring to Parliament to place some responsibility on parents for their underage children in criminal activities.
And by responsibility, what exactly would that look like? Is it jail, the term that they're going to serve time, or is that along the lines that you're looking at? Or?
Certainly fines, possibly, depending, it's too early for me to give you the details of it yet. But we are considering options.
Just before you go, Mr. Roll wants to supplement the answer to the question that I gave on Bahamian investment.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I just wanted to follow up on the answer that you provided regarding Bahamians investing in the resort sector.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fallacy that Bahamians are not investing and that they don't have access to the same incentives that foreigners do. The Hotel Encouragement Act is very clear, and any Bahamian can access concessions under the Hotel Encouragement Act. If you go throughout the Family Islands, many of the small resorts are owned by Bahamian. You go into Harbor Island, Marubi runs one of the most successful small resort in the Family Island, Tingham Village. If you go into Governor's Harbor, Sikatuin, that's owned by a Bahamian. You go into Andros, Randy Butler from Sky is a resort owner. So I don't want people to believe that Bahamians can't access those incentives that are available and that they are not investing. But if you look at the large investment, it's capital intensive. And many Bahamians shy away from the huge amount of investment that has to go into these large resorts. But Holowesco, they've done it. The Simonets have done it in Eleuthera.
But what the government has been doing recently is looking at ways for Bahamians to benefit from all of the services that are attached to these resorts. So if there's a business opportunity attached to a major resort, then we look for people that may be able to fit the bill. So we are actively looking to ensure that Bahamians have the same rights to invest in their own country. And we provide the same incentives that we provide to foreigners for Bahamians.
Thank you. Sia Scotterly, ZNS News. I would assume this would be for Mr. Davis, but you guys could correct me if I'm wrong. I just wanted to know where the government is at in terms of the BEC privatization process.
No.
Thank you. Where we are is our advisors, KPMG, has made recommendations requiring setting out options for the government's consideration. The cabinet has considered those and has asked that a subcommittee of cabinet, that's chaired by me, to have it to review it further and to fine-tune those options and to revert to them. We expect to do that within the next week and a half.
Can you allude to some of those, recommendations, general areas?
Well, I would not wish to disclose it, but for example, whether we unbundle the services, i.e., whether we have generation separated from transmission and distribution and the fallout from that, or how best that served the Bahamian people, whether we go to smart metering and how that best suit and serve the Bahamian people, and whether amongst those who are preferred as bidders, whether what they'll be required insofar as how they address what we call the legacy debts and how they're going to raise the funding to provide the necessary capital to achieve the goal that the government wishes to achieve, and that is lowering the cost of electricity to the Bahamian people. And so we have to examine their financial model to ensure that the financial model put forward by them will produce the result for the lower cost of electricity that we expect.
So you think the process is still on track for this year?
It's still on track, and I'll invite my fellow colleague, the Minister of the Environment, to share some of his comments on this issue as well.
Yes. Thank you, DPM, and good afternoon all. I think as you are all aware, lowering the cost of electricity is a key plank in our Charter for Governance, together with the government's commitment to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. I'd like to simply reiterate the fact that the government has made some significant strides in this process. The management of BEC certainly should be commended for what they have done thus far in being able to reduce the costs, which has also been facilitated by the government eliminating the excess tax on fuel last year, coupled with the fact that we have also in the area of renewable energy eliminated all customs duties on solar panels and solar inverters. And the Prime Minister last year has indicated that this year we will advance a residential energy self-generation program. So net metering and or billing will become a reality for the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, enabling us to rely on the one source that God has provided us in terms of sun, where we enjoy in excess of 300 solar irradiation days every calendar year. And so I'm really proud of what the government is doing in the area of renewables. It is something that we have been commended on throughout the world, and as a matter of fact, as a result of those efforts, the Bahamas has now been elected the co-chair of the Caribbean Challenge Initiative, which is a grouping of 10 Caribbean islands who in the first instance were focusing on protecting 20% of our nearshore environment, and that has now been extended to incorporating, pushing renewable energy technologies throughout the Caribbean. In relation to the Ministry of Environment, I want to first and foremost say that you may have heard from different ministers speak about a lot of different things. And I think one of the things we have to underscore is that the Christie-led administration is making a tremendous attempt at the diversification of the Bahamian economy. And so when you look at the creation of BAMC, for the first time we are having a concentrated effort on diversification of the sector. But the reason why that is so important for my ministry is that we talk about the green economy and we talk about the blue economy. And so forestry, while the other side indicated that it was trivial legislation being brought to Parliament, the creation of our forest estates for the first time will enable us to create hunting and gaming reserves in Andros, which is long overdue, which creates ecotourism opportunities for our people, and which is one of those areas that is not as capital intensive as other hotel resort properties. And so we welcome the opportunity for the passage of those amendments to enable that to happen. In addition, we now have under negotiations 2 projects which will enable us to use the resin from the Bahamian pine tree for export, as well as advance the timber industry in forestry. I also want to advise the general public that in relation to oil exploration, the Cabinet has first and foremost reviewed the draft legislation which we have promised. It has gone back to the AG's office for further amendments, and we hope to bring that before Parliament in short order. On the issue of housing, we have begun the construction in Strawn's Hill. We have already awarded 23 contracts, which has created 230 jobs. There are more to come, and while it has taken us some time to get started, the point is we have started and we are moving forward. And so I'm being beckoned to move on, but certainly I just want to mention one thing: landfill reform in the Bahamas. The New Providence landfill has been a vexing problem for us for well over 40 years. This Christie-led administration promised a recycling effort in our country as of July 1 through a joint venture with the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and a private sector grouping. We will have landfill remediation at the landfill, bringing an end, we hope, to all of the fires, the environmental degradation, but more importantly, beginning recycling at the landfill, which is incredibly important.
And this is just my final question for you, Mr. Christie. You talked a lot about the positivity surrounding job outlooks, but just for this year alone, can you kind of hone in into the kind of numbers, apart from the opening of Baha Mar, what job outlook will look like for 2014?
We're going to count them for you. There are hundreds of jobs in the making, construction, and in resort when it's finished. I really wanted to just give you a sense that we had succeeded in being able to create economic activity right across the length and breadth of the Bahamas, and jobs associated with it, and also entrepreneurial opportunities. I'm not really ready to count now. We're still driving to create more activity, and what I would want to do is to use this opportunity. I think we're at the stage where we're out of time, and I'm going to have to sum up where we are. There's someone who hadn't asked a question behind you? One person? Well, let me just put it this way, right? We will be able to count the jobs for you and provide the numbers, but they are all over the Bahamas, and they're happening now. And as I said before, we are very encouraged with what is happening, and we'll just keep you informed.
Thank you, Mr.
Madam? Sorry.
Good afternoon, Mr. Prime Minister. Arabina Apia, MBN News and hard copy. I wanted to know how or where is the government in terms of coming up with the select committee for BTC rather. I know that following the negotiations with Cable and Wireless, there was an announcement that the details that was struck in the deal of the former administration would be released to the public. Is there a timeline as to when that's going to happen? Is that still part of the government's agenda?
Well, I think, again, this is a lead of government business, but the position is we're headed towards a budget the annual budget debate that happens in around the third week of May. And so, given the House agenda where we are now, the present legislation before us, I'm not sure, Dr. Nodish, whether we have the time before the budget debate to have a select committee debate.
Unlikely.
It's unlikely. It is very, very significant, we believe. We are going to have the debate. It was, and I think it will be instructive to the Bahamian people.
Okay, and final question. As you mark 2 years of governance, I know there's been a lot of criticism, particularly from opposition politicians, regarding your administration's level of communication with each other in terms of speaking cohesively and in one voice on a lot of national issues. You care to respond to any of those criticisms?
No, I will respond. You see, I think clearly governments must speak with as near to possible one voice with one message. But we also have a group of highly intelligent men and women who have their own views. And as long as those views do not conflict with policy, as long as those views are, to me, instructive. And let me give you an example, for example. I would expect in my cabinet Mrs. Hannah Martin, for example, to have strong views when it comes down to the protection of civil liberties. I would expect her to speak out for that, all right? And that's her stand. I would expect her to speak out for the rights of the citizen to participate in a consultative process when it comes to development. That is what she does. Her views may in fact not ring and sort of rhyme with some other minister who was talking that subject as to timing and whether or not he agrees with her. But when it comes around the table and we sit around the table and make a decision, that's when all of us must agree. And that's when all of us must speak with one voice. And I think it would happen there. But I want my ministers to be able to be provocative sometimes and to speak to issues which reflect the views. Like the Deputy Prime Minister and myself, he's a very liberal person when it comes down to certain things, and I'm the opposite. I'm a conservative. So he and I can't sit in the same room and talk the same language, but we'll have to come around this table, and when the liberals outweigh the conservatives, then we go with the liberals. When the conservatives outweigh the liberals, we go with my side. But that's what happens, you see. So if you talk to him about capital punishment, you might have something different from me, all right? And so if we're out there, someone will say, oh, Christie's saying something different. Yeah, that's true. But at the end of the day, we will sit around the table, make a decision on one voice. That's fine? Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, let me take this opportunity just to thank you very much. This is the first time this has been done, and we thought we would do it and expose as many ministers as possible to the questions that you would ask. Cabinet functions in a way here in the Bahamas where each minister is supposed to master his or her portfolio and to be able to represent that portfolio around the table. And yes, at the end of the day, it must be cohesive, it must be integrated, and it must be coordinated. And that's what we expect. And so you can expect us to have these kinds of occasions more regularly. We will learn from this one, and ministers, for example, like Mrs. Hannah Martin, for example, who has the responsibility of how you get into the Bahamas by air and how you leave by ship, or how you come in by ship, and that's her responsibility. And in the process, she is negotiating a new paradigm for the Bahamas called Flight Information Regime. And these are things we have to talk to the Bahamian people about, because it can result in significant revenue for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and a greatly, I suppose, a more defined relationship between the Bahamas and the FAA in the United States of America. In the case of Mrs. Griffin, as we speak of that, for example, Mrs. Griffin has a cash transfer, a new initiative in social services that is supposed to give the person who is receiving benefits from social services a more dignified access to support. It is going to become important, because when we discuss that, as we will do now in the next week or two, we are going to have to make a decision as to whether or not we exempt, and if so, what we exempt. Whether or not, if we don't exempt, we're going to have to put in place compensation to the people who are in need. Mrs. Griffin has that. The Ministry of Health. Today we had extensive discussions on health care. National health insurance, universal health care, and where the government affirmed its commitment to introduce national health care. We had the consultants in, we had the Bahamian teams in, and we had a that's the Minister of Health. In addition to that, the Minister of Health has introduced a new regime in stem cells, and the law is passed, the regulations are just about complete, and he's now finishing a protocol with the University of Miami, a memorandum of understanding, similar to what we're doing in agriculture with the University of Florida and the University of Miami. And so we are moving, I think, with great speed to deliver significantly to this country. Ryan Pinder in financial services and trade. At the Caribbean level, I argued strenuously for the Caribbean to use its might and power as a united region with the government of Canada so we could move to a conclusion, the trade treaty between Canada and the region. Ryan is now going to Guyana on Thursday, where we believe that now will reach its final stages. Am I correct, Ryan? All right, and move forward with that treaty, which again is good for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas in terms of the exports into Canada. So there are issues that we're dealing with. The Minister for Grand Bahama. Grand Bahama has been barely touched, and that is going to be where we do great work in the coming months in Grand Bahama. And we have the Minister for Grand Bahama here, and so quite frankly, we're going to have to find that formula to be able to ensure that our programs are known by the people of this country. And this is a good start for me, and I thank you all very much for your participating. And to those who asked the provocative questions, you know, no problem at all. We believe that is your job, and we thank you really for putting us in a position to be able to answer, even if there's a little bit of acid in the response. We congratulate you and we encourage you. Thank you very much.
Well, the Prime Minister and his cabinet colleagues holding a very open forum, one of the first of its kind actually, for the press, and addressing a wide range of issues that affect all Bahamians, and also giving some insight as to what is going to be happening going forward. And that really ends our broadcast here from the Cabinet Office. I'm Julian Reed.
Andros, what Andros has been waiting for generations.
This has been a report to the nation from the official cabinet of the Bahamas.